Timing, especially for the ucat, is very important. And these are the things I wish someone told me before I started the ucat, because they help immensely with the timing. And just trying to work things out and making the whole process less stressful. And without further ado, the first thing that we have to do with the timings is to set a date and to set a time in order to do the test. As soon as you set a date and a time, it really relieves a lot of stress because it means you're working towards something, and it means that you're less likely to procrastinate and you're less likely to get stressed towards the date. It also means that you can book as early as possible, which helps a lot, and it means that you can book a test center which is closer to your home, helping with that sense of familiarity, something that really helps to lower the pressure that you may feel on the day. And it also gives you time to do things that you'd usually do in your mornings because the commute wouldn't be too much. And after you set up a date, and it really does help you structure your revision a lot better because you know for certain that you'll have to do the test on that date and you're firm on it. And which means that you can structure your revision around it. One of the mistakes that I did when I was structuring my revision was I blocked out specific weeks for different things and different sections, which was probably one of the worst things I could have ever done because the ucat is very much a vocational thing where you need to learn by practicing it. And because I've only practiced something for a week and I might be the best at it because I practiced hours upon hours for a week, it doesn't mean that I'll still have the same edge when it gets to the actual exam, because I would have forgotten most of the techniques and most of the things I practiced. It's much better to split your whole revision day, not saying a day isn't that, but however much hours you're revising within the day and split it evenly between all of the different sections, give or take the ones that you feel less confident in. For example, if you feel very unconfident in verbal reasoning but very confident in abstract reasoning, then suffice it to say you spend more time on verbal than abstract, and vice versa throughout all of the different things. This is something that I actually did utilize towards the end when I was giving myself a synoptic week, which probably did more to help me than the initial weeks did, of just trying to learn things separately. And learning in this way, where you're learning a specific part every single day, means that you can build up things, and it makes the whole period a lot easier because you don't just have a week, you have the whole time span, and that's more of a psychological benefit to setting up your revision in that way. I also had a week before and a sort of reading week before I ever even practiced, which was probably also a huge waste of time because even though I may have made a lot of notes and for the ucat, it didn't work for me. Well, all of them did not work for me because I didn't test on myself. I was just watching someone else give me tips and assumed that that's universal, the same way that you'd assume the CGP book on the biology exam will be universal for the biology exam. But they're two different things, and the more that I really go into this medicine journey, the more that I realize that, and it's something very important to utilize when you are starting. Also, another thing that I did correctly was I started and doing a mock per week, which really helped to outline what my strengths and weaknesses were. And this mock per week also helped me get used to the behemoth of an exam it is. Because the timings for each section are just so small for the amount of questions you need to do, it can often seem as a very easy thing to sit through, but it isn't. It's a very long exam, and that's something that you'd want to get used to, especially in the computerized format that not most of us are used to. When you're structuring your revision, make sure that you're structuring it in a way where you are starting to revise in the times that you're most useful, and try to figure this out by just changing your revision times until you find a specific set of times which help you stay focused and help you utilize and the resources that you have. This is also very important that you figure this out early, is because you'd want to set that time universally throughout your full revision period. And one of the better things that I did, and one of the better decisions I made, was I gave myself about 2 months and a half to revise for the ucat, which helped me make a lot of mistakes. And throughout the first month, which helped me remedy them in the later months. In the later month, which probably did more to help my ucat score than the first month did. For each section, you would also want to have timings. And for VR, you'd want to have at least half the questions done in half the time. This was a metric that I set myself, which was very useful, and very useful in telling me when I should start hurrying up and when I should skip questions, and having that always in my head as a mark point, because it's very easy to get to 2 minutes left in the exam and you have 10 questions left, which ended up happening in my real exam, because I didn't stick to this half the questions done in half the time format. Also, skip questions. If you know that a passage is long and you don't understand it that well, then it's going to obviously take you a lot more time than a shorter passage, or a passage you may understand a bit more because you have an interest in it. So skip around. You don't need to do everything one by one. And use the flagging tool. That's probably one of the only useful things in the test, is your ability to be able to flag questions and come back to them, and after you finish the whole round of questions. Utilize that tool because it will be a time saver. If you're spending more than 30 seconds on a question, just guess it, and just try to strategically guess it. What I did was I just chose C for all of them, and then I came back and then I went through them. Then if I still couldn't do them, I would strategically guess them. This just reduced the chances of me doing the wrong answer, because a broken clock is right twice a day. If I pick C for every question I don't know, C might be right at least 2 times, and that's 2 extra marks I would have not gotten if I was just doing anything that came to my mind. Have a strategy with these things. For AR, write down the mnemonic before you actually go and start the section. For me, it was spunks, but some people use scans, and I will make a much larger video about this after. If it takes you more than 30 seconds to answer a question like the VR, just skip it, because there's no point of dwelling on this one question when you have so much more questions to do. If it's a simple pattern and you see the simple pattern, don't try to look for a more complex one, especially when you're so short for time. Just click it, it's most likely right. The simplest one is probably the one to get you the mark. QR. Try not to use the calculator as much as you can, and try to skip out on the longer questions or the questions that you personally find harder. No one can figure this out but you, so I'll just recommend doing as many questions as possible, and the ones that you are the fastest with, start with those in the test, but when you're practicing, and the ones that you're the slowest, repeat them. And the good thing about Medify is that you can repeat specific sections. Really utilize that tool to make sure that everything is as good as possible. But of course, you're human, there's always going to be things that are much easier, so play with your strengths in this exam. For situational judgment, this was definitely one of my most favorite parts of the exam. It was such an ethical it was so based on ethics and so based on knowledge, and it was really a sigh of relief for me personally, and so it meant that I actually got the questions done a lot quicker. And this is so important in your practice. Try to enjoy the process of practicing, because when you do that, you will also enjoy the process of taking the test, weirdly enough, and that might also help with your timings, because you're less stressed out about whether or not you're doing it correct, or thinking about how much you hate the subject at hand. And this is something I utilize, the situational judgment test. And during the situational judgment test, try to look and try to note down, and from this main resource, and it's a resource that I used and a lot of other people used, including Karma Medic. It is the GMC's Tomorrow's Doctors. Just search it up. I'll have a link in the description. Use it. It will be incredibly beneficial. And for this part, really make sure you don't overthink it. Choose your gut instinct. If you think that you might be wrong here, and you really think you might be wrong here, flag it, come back to it later. You can check on these questions about 2 times usually, because of the amount of time they give you. This is really a time for you to decompress. Not fully, but after you've finished the first round, you can go into it a lot more quicker. The keys for timing is always to study when you're focused and you're ready. Make sure that you have a set time in choosing it, and because that will help against the mental friction that comes with preparing for a test that's just so new, such as a computerized test. And buy a whiteboard and try to use a mouse and keyboard just so you can replicate how the real test is. The computers they have there are not state of the art usually, and so if you can try to have that sort of environment at home, it would help you a lot when you're trying to figure out timings for the actual exam. Have a nice time preparing, and stay tuned for more videos related to the medical process.